solidarity with other people who are struggling, we are failing the people.
Yeah.
Right? So it wasn't always just about our struggle. It was about what was happening with other folks in our community. I'm from Seattle. And you just learn that over time. It doesn't take anything away from you to stand up for someone else, right? You learn that, hopefully you learn that at home too, about when you see somebody getting bullied.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the other thing that I really thought we should dive into, which is like what allyship is, what solidarity is, and what it means to stand alongside your friends who are experiencing this in a real way because they're Black right now, right? So if we can, for a second, talk about what we think allyship is. I think that's an important, not really a pivot point, but I think the next layer of this. When you hear the word ally, what does ally mean to you?
Someone who's on your side.
Yeah. Well, you made that plain. I think you don't have to. It really is, but it's someone who's by your side. How, right? And I think that how matters. It is someone who is engaging with you. It's not someone who will just retweet. It's not someone that's just like, back in the day, I'm older than y'all. So back in the day, some politicians would get on there and say, I feel your pain, right? It's someone who really works toward empathy and trying to put themselves in your shoes. My mom says so much, probably because I haven't learned it yet, but she says all the time, Angela, the greatest skill in life you can gain is perspective taking. And that means to literally take yourself out of what you think is right, what you think is the path, and say, how does this person see it if I put myself in their shoes? It's so important as an ally to be informed. Like, you can't step out there and be in front of a movement you don't understand. You can't step out there and be shoulder to shoulder with someone when you haven't understood, you know, why they may be triggered by this incident. You know, what have they personally experienced? Why does it bother them so much? Are they afraid of the police, and why? What experiences have they personally encountered? And once you do some of that, just some of that listening, then you can be an informed ally.
Yeah.
You know, you're a witness then to the problem.
Yeah.
And if you look at history, especially in this country, there have always been white allies to Black movements.
Yeah.
Sometimes they led. If you think about John Brown, sometimes they just stood alongside them. There were several rabbis in the Jewish community that stood by Dr. King, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other really important piece of this. Allyship doesn't necessarily mean you're out front, but it does mean you're alongside. Just, and I think it's such a powerful way to say that.
Yeah.
So when you all think about your roles right now, what do you feel like, okay, this is what I'm kind of feeling like I should be doing, I should be called to do?
To be honest, I think the first thing that always for me is I want to support, but I think that a lot of times when something like this happens, it's always a matter of like, what more can I do? How can I be like louder about this? How can I do more? What is the, you know, and I think that doing what we're doing right now is one of the biggest ways to say, you know, like, you know, when we were on the phone, even before we did this, it's like, educate me, like tell me how can I help you in this time? Like, just tell me how to be there for you, and tell me how to like stand there and hold your hand and be there and have your back, and like you said, be an ally, stand there with you, and like, what does that look like, and you know, what is the best way to do that? Because I also think we're two people who have really big platforms, and as much as we can Instagram and tweet and do all of those things, sometimes it's much bigger than that, and it's a bigger conversation than that. And you know,
because yes, we can post the phone numbers and stuff, but I also want to just be able to.
We have a cat. Our cat is on the counter.
Sorry.
We had a knife.
I see the cat. They don't see the cat, but I see the cat.
We had a knife.
They're going crazy.
Oh, that was a knife. I was like, why is Justin flashing the light? He's like, who do I need to cut for this?
Right.
No. The cat was gonna start playing with the knife, so we were like, oh god, we gotta leave it. But what I was saying is, you know, this just happens too often to just Instagram or just tweet or just post the phone number. And
sorry, I was just gonna say, because I felt like almost I've been feeling shame in the sense of like why did it take these men being killed for me to almost like take a blanket over my eyes and be like why now? And I gotta say I do feel bad when it comes to that.
And I would agree with that. I would say that there's definitely been a lot of times where, and we've talked about this between the two of us as, you know, husband and wife, where we've been really ignorant to a lot of things. And we've said ignorant things, and we've just really not understood. And that's why I'm so grateful, first of all, for you even doing this and having this conversation with us, because we don't know what we don't know, and we can't change what we're ignorant to. So I just wanted to say thank you for even doing this.
Yeah, and thank you.
I'm loving having this discussion and this conversation because I think it's really powerful.
I want to say thank you to you all for being open to it, because again, I know it's not comfortable. Like there are spaces that you all occupy that are more in your comfort zone, and this is one of those things. Just you just talk about the blanket being pulled off your eyes, and I think it is important to take a moment and sit with that. What was different about this time for y'all? And just like, don't worry about the guilt of not having done it before, because we still have to move forward, right? We can say, okay, I apologize for every time somebody tried to call my attention to this and I didn't step up. I'm sorry. I'm in the game now, coach. What do I got to do, right? Yeah. And so I think the question I have for you is really, what was different about this time?
I think just the blatancy of it, just how blatant it is. I think sometimes for us as humans in general, things are like, we're all going through our unique struggles in life, you know? And I think sometimes it's out of sight, out of mind, I think, for me. And having white privilege, it's just not something I deal with as an individual. So it's just out of sight, out of mind. And so when these things are happening and they're at the forefront and I'm swiping through Instagram and I'm seeing it, it's like it's so prevalent and it's so in your face that there's no denying that this is the reality. And that's pretty much why I
totally
think.
Agree. I think also, you know, I had a conversation one time with a friend of mine, and she is a white woman. Sorry, our cats are just being rude.
I can see the cats that line about they're right over there.
I had a conversation with a friend, I remember, and I'll never forget this conversation because I thought it was so valuable. And she said, well, you know, I do feel like it was between me and another friend of mine who was white and another friend of ours who was a black woman. And she said to me, you know, to be fair, I do think we have come a really long way from the days of segregated, you know, church or movie theaters or things like that. And I was like, but have we come a long way? And she said, well, we've had a black president. And I was like, yeah, but what's right in front of us is that people in the black community are blatantly being treated differently and they're losing their lives. So have we really come that far? Because the fact is that this happened probably a year ago, is that it's 2020 and this is still happening, and you're comparing something from, like, we should be so far advanced and it still feels like it's...
Would that be an ignorant question to ask of, like, is it at all better? Is it worse? Is it the same?
I think that it's better, but I think it's, I talk about incrementalism a lot, in that incremental change is not the same as a massive change, right? So what you'll hear overwhelmingly are people, I've been in politics a long time, my career's been in politics. You'll hear people that celebrate, like, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the 1968 Fair Housing Act as the most monumental pieces of legislation for black people. Y'all, how long ago was that? Right? And so it's like, those are the biggest shifts. And then the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2014. Was it 2013 or 2014? I think it was 2014. Maybe it was 2013. Either way, a few years ago, and it still hasn't been corrected. So what you see are like politicians that kind of hedge, like, I can't do anything that's too black. If I do something that's too black, I'm going to lose my white voters. Why is that the case?
Yeah.
Why is that the case? It should not be. It should be a false choice that if you do something for black people, you will lose white voters. It should be that white voters
and that's
see the importance.
Sorry,
isn't that right?
That's the reality?
Yeah, that is the reality, and part of it is this cyclical effect, right? So there's this I'm gonna do what I need to do to get white voters, but I'm gonna leave black people behind, and so they're not even sure now if that's the case. But they've told themselves that for so long that that's what they're doing, and so as the time goes by from those, the 1960s movement that was really led by Dr. King and Bayard Rustin and Reverend Shuttlesworth and all of these amazing people, Diane Nash, the truth of it is we haven't even seen it because we won't even try. So there are things that can happen politically, legislatively, to change so many of these things at the state level, at the city level, at the county level, and of course at the federal level. And those are the places where I feel allyship could be a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Challenging members of Congress who are going to be blown away by y'all's platforms saying, no, there are actually some things that need to happen so black people can survive in this country.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be that we're asking for ways to ensure that people can live. It should be that they would be able to live abundant lives.
Wow.
Yeah.
But right now we're just at survival.
Just survival.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that is the thing. So
we also, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, we live in a country that talks a big game about being land of the free.
Ooh.
And,
it's just not
it's
true.
just not true.
It's not true.
It's just not true, for
that was
so
a promise
many.
made for some, but not all.
It's
When
not
we talk
true.
about, even in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we did not come here with liberty and have yet to arrive to liberty. We came just barely alive and have yet to find abundant life. We're not allowed to pursue happiness because we're just trying to make sure that we can make it to the next day. The talks that we have to have with our children and the talks around the kitchen table or the dinner table are so exhausting.
Yeah.
It's just about, what parents have to tell their kids. If you get pulled over by the police, keep both hands on the steering wheel. Don't talk back. State your name. Say if you need to reach for something. Like, it's that serious.
Yeah.
It's that serious. And so that's really the thing that what we should be talking about is, why is it so easy for white people to stand with the gay community, to stand with pets, right? To stand up for pets. I can't remember who died around Cecil the lion, but there was more outrage for Cecil the lion than the black person that got killed around it. I wish to God I could think about it. I'll look at my phone really quick. And then for women, we can stand with women around Me Too, and we should, and around pay disparity, and we should. But why, when it comes to black people, it's like, okay, I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I can't talk about that. You don't have to stand up for everything else.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
There was a video
That
I
is
saw today, and I would love to quickly just get his name because I want to say the right thing. Where he talked a lot about, unlearning. It starts with unlearning, and I love that. Let me just grab his name really quick because I'd love to give him.
While you're doing that, I'm looking up Cecil the lion and who died around that. Because I'm like, who was the person?
Dang.
It was astounding. And then for us, it's enraging. It's like, wow, you care more. Not that you shouldn't care about Cecil the lion, but like, what is going on?
And so, what is?
Yeah, it was a black man killed by the University of Cincinnati police right around the same time.
And the reality is that it's because we live in a society and a world that is racist. That's why.
Yeah. The guy who I was talking about is Brandon Goodman.
Okay.
And he posted a video today that I came across that I thought was really powerful, where he was talking a lot about unlearning, and I think that's so true. I think that there's so much unlearning to do.
Yeah.
I think, but racism is a heart thing, and as I don't know if you know, but Hailey and I are both Christians, we believe in the love of Jesus, and I truly believe that the love of Jesus is really what's going to change hearts. Because racism
I don't know if you
is
read what you sent me earlier, but I think that had a lot to do with actually what you're kind of talking about. And do you mind would you actually read what you sent me?
Yeah, I'll read it. Justin, finish your point, and then I'll read it. Can we do that, Hailey?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that racism is a hard issue, and Jesus is a redeemer, and he can redeem those thoughts, those feelings of racism. And so I would just encourage people to, take a look at your soul and your spirit, and I think that's where it starts, to be honest. So, but what were you going to show us?
I'm going to read you that, but I want to respond to that too, because I think it's something that you can take with you. Prejudice and implicit bias are the heart issues, right? So every one of us can have that. What's different about racism is the power behind the prejudice. So I can't be racist because I don't have institutional power to hold you back. I can't be prejudiced. I can be discriminatory in my practices, right? Okay. But racism is about the power to be able to use discriminatory intent or impact to keep somebody else down. Okay. And when we talk about systemic racism and systemic oppression, that's what that is. Okay. So not that one is better than the other, but one has more power and can do a lot more harm. Yeah. And that is the reason why we keep seeing these police killings. It is an institutional problem. That's why a black police officer, for example, can be a part of systemic racism because it's the institution. It's not that individual actor, if that makes sense. So I sent you all this devotional from, he's actually a priest named Richard Rohr, who's on with Oprah a lot. And I love his stuff because I always say I believe in a social justice gospel, because I believe like the Bible that folks read to use it to oppress other people, I don't read that Bible. I don't know what God they're serving where that works. So Richard Rohr is like about that life. Like this is a white dude who regularly is like, oh, my platform, there's a dope woman, a black woman that y'all need to hear from. She's doing this email today. So he knows like how to democratize the platform to give access to other voices who ordinarily wouldn't have it. So this is called Invitation to Solidarity. So this is called Invitation to Solidarity. It looks longer than it is. But he says, throughout human history, countless people have been poor, vulnerable, or oppressed in some way. Those holding positions of authority within systems of power secure their own privilege, comfort, and wealth, almost always at the expense of those most on the margins. Much of history has been recorded to hide this fact and instead celebrates the so-called winners. I call this systemic reality a form of sin, or what the Apostle Paul describes as the world. So worldly for all the church folks out there. This type of corporate evil is often culturally agreed upon, admired, and deemed necessary, as is normally the case when a country goes to war, spends most of its budget on armaments, those are weapons in case people don't know, admires luxuries over necessities, entertains itself to death, or pollutes its common water and air. The hidden nature of systemic oppression, we just talked about that, makes it all the more remarkable that the revelation of God in the Bible is written from the perspective of the oppressed. The Bible reveals a liberating path of humility, compassion, and nonviolence in the face of oppression that culminates in the life, ministry, and state-sponsored execution of Jesus. We see in the Gospels that the people who tend to follow Jesus are the ones on the margins. The lame, poor, blind, prostitutes, drunkards, tax collectors, and foreigners. He lived in close proximity to and in solidarity with the excluded ones in society. Those on the inside and at the center of power are the ones who crucify him. Elders, chief priests, teachers of the law, scribes, and Roman occupiers. Yet, we still honor people in these latter roles and shun the ones in the former. For the first 300 years after Jesus' death, Christians were the oppressed minority. But by the year 400 CE, Christians had changed places. We moved from hiding in the catacombs to presiding in the basilicas. That is when we started reading the Bible, not as subversive literature, the story of the oppressed, but as establishment literature to justify the status quo of people in power. When Christians began to gain positions of power and privilege, they also began to ignore segments of Scripture, especially the Sermon on the Mount. Our position in society determines what we pay attention to and what systems we are willing to go along with. This is what allowed Christian, he put in the quotations here too, Christian empires throughout history to brutalize and oppress others in the name of God. Sadly, this is still the case today. But when the Bible is read through the eyes of solidarity, what we call the preferential option for the poor or the bias from the margins, it will always be liberating, transformative, and empowering in a completely different way. Read this way. I'm sorry, let me try that again. Read this way, Scripture cannot be used by those with power to oppress or impress. The question is no longer, how can I maintain my special and secure status? It is, how can we all grow and change together? I think the acceptance of that invitation to solidarity with the larger pain of the world is what it means to be a Christian.
Wow.
Do you all know how many people I forwarded to? And this was before we learned about George Floyd, like just the eerie timing of that. When I was like, oh my God, I have this new like revolutionary way of looking at solidarity, you know? And again, like we talked at the beginning about privilege on a scale. I'm privileged to a degree. It's different from you all's privilege, but I still need to be using the space that I occupy to empower, to create space for, to serve people who live on the margins.
Wow.
Right? That's just what it is. So.
I love that what you
great.
said earlier, and I read it earlier too, and I thought it was really powerful.
So
People
good.
wanna
I wish they were my words.
People want to follow Jesus where they want to go, but not everywhere Jesus went. And Jesus went to the marginalized. And
yeah, we were just our pastor. We belong to a church called Church Home, and it's pastored by Judah Smith. And he actually had a message on Wednesday about when Jesus went to the well, when there was a woman there that went at noon because she knew no one would be there because she was, you know, an outcast, and
she was Samaritan.
Yeah, she was a Samaritan. So in the Bible, Jews and Samaritans did not interact, and they didn't get along. So I just love the perspective of that, where, you know, Jesus was in there. He was at the well with the people that nobody wanted to be there with and nobody wanted to interact with. And I love that, and I cling to that, and I hold on to that, and you know, it really impacted.
It was
me.
important to Jesus.
Yeah.
It was important to Jesus for him to make that, to stand with people.
Yeah.
With the forgotten, with the jailed, with the, you know, with everyone who we so readily walk by and are like the folks who are treated as invisible. The folks who would declare Black Lives Matter are the people who he would be marching with, you know, or feeding or working with, or figuring out how he can lift up. And I think that's just it.
There are a lot of churches who aren't speaking up, and they're just, and I don't think that's okay.
Yeah. Because they don't want to lose their congregation, and they don't want people to leave.
They don't want to ruffle
church.
feathers, or I'm not sure.
Hailey, say that again, because that's why the laws haven't changed. They don't want what?
They don't want people to leave their church.
Yeah.
So they don't want to lose the vote. So see what I'm saying? So it's power. They think that power begets power only if you continue to devalue the marginalized and the oppressed, and like that cycle has to be broken.
And it just perpetuates. It just keeps pushing it, and this is why, like when I asked you earlier about how far we've come, it's like, and we have, but the cycle is still continuously being perpetuated.
That's right.
So I wanted to ask too, you know, like, I don't know if we've really heard from you yet, like, when I say to you and when I ask you, what is the best thing for us to do in a time like this, when a tragedy like this happens, which has happened multiple times and happens far too often, like what is the best thing for us to do with a platform like we have as a white woman and a white man? Like, how can we, what is the best way to support and be an ally and to stand with you? Like, what can we do?
I think one of the first things that I want to encourage you all to do, there's a book by Ibrahim Kendi. I want to make sure I'm saying his name right. That's called Ibrahim Kendi. That's called How to Be Anti-Racist.
Wow.
And the book is so good because it stretches how to be an anti-racist stretches all of us, right, to do and be our best selves and to learn. There is another book by the name of the author is Ijeoma Oluwo, and I just had her on my podcast. And she has a book that's about Let's Talk About Racism. So I think the reading piece is important. There are other actions that you can do as well, but I wanted to get to talk about that learning portion that Justin brought up earlier because that's also crucial. There are